Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Pro Football Story channel. I am your host, Flynn Gibbon, and today we were talking about the Minnesota Vikings. So we'll be discussing their 2021 season, as well as discussing their future and some of the free agents that they picked up and some of the moves they've been doing. So to start off, obviously, a team that's been really hit and miss every year for the past decade, playoffs, not playoffs, playoffs, not playoffs, especially under Mike Zimmer, that was the case. And this was a year they were expected to, possibly be a playoff team. And this would have been they missed it the year before. So I thought, well, maybe they make it this year. And ultimately it didn't happen. They had their chance down the stretch. Just they lost a few games and ultimately took them out of the playoffs. Obviously, this team is now, as a new head coach, new general manager. They're changing schemes on defense to a 3-4, which they haven't run in a long time. If ever, I'm trying to think about it. I don't know if this team's ever really run a 3-4, just off the top of my head. Uh, Goes back. If they have, it's a long time ago. I don't think they have though. So first game, the favored, or they're not the home team, but going the season, Bengals expectations obviously weren't that big. Maybe 6 wins, maybe they can get a winning season by a lot of luck. I didn't think that was even a little stretch, but they made it to the Super Bowl. So looking back, it's like, okay, went overtime with the Vikings, but this was a point in the season. It's like they lose an overtime game to a team people expect them to beat. And then for the Bengals, Joe Burrow's coming off the injury, first game back, didn't play preseason. Uh, was a great win and really started off their season onto a just great start. And for Minnesota, this obviously was a disappointing loss for them. Kirk Cousins, had a great year. If you look at his numbers, most games he played really well. This is the game, pretty well. You can't blame Kirk Cousins with that stat line. And Dalvin Cook, they couldn't run the ball too well. Did have a decent run in overtime, if I remember correctly. Um, but yeah, Joe Burrow played decently well. He had sacked 5 times, which, if you look at the Bengals this year, that was the norm. But Vikings just couldn't stop the run or the pass too well. And you lose a close game. Maybe you can call it a heartbreaker. Either way, they then play the Arizona Cardinals. Also, we didn't know they were going to start 7-0. But another game where the Vikings could have won. Last second field goal. And, miss it. Obviously, it's funny, how, the play by play, if you ever listen to this game, they made it sound like it was a made field goal and then it was all of a sudden missed. Kind of funny. Paul Allen, I think it's Paul Allen, the radio guy for the Minnesota Vikings. But either way, this is again a competitive game. Minnesota jumped to a good start. They just allowed Arizona to slowly come back. I know there's a pick six in this game by Nick Vigil of the Vikings, who I think just signed with the Cardinals today. I know he signed with a new team. I'm pretty sure it was the Cardinals. Again, Kirk Cousins played really well. Kyler Murray, 2 bad receptions, but he played well. He also had a rushing touchdown. He didn't really run the ball too much. A lot of passing for Murray and the Cardinals, and Dalvin Cook had a big day. If you look at the stat line, they should not lose this game. When you have a running back running for that well, and your quarterback throws 3 touchdowns, no picks, and doesn't have a lot of incompletions and decent yards per completion. Again, another game they could have won, played well enough to win, ultimately did not win the game. And they played the Seattle Seahawks, who, this started the trend, the ugly start before the Russell Wilson injury. Vikings finally win a game. The team, they had some decent fights, but usually would lose. But this was a game they won. Kirk Cousins played really well again. Russell Wilson played fairly well, but just not. They didn't have the ball a lot, and they couldn't sustain drives. And with Alexander Madison, it was enough for the Vikings to win this game by 13 points. Play the Cleveland Browns. Again, very odd game. If you look back on it, let me refresh the page. But if you look back on it, Cleveland Browns run pretty much the same offense as the Vikings. So it's an odd game on paper since they were so familiar with each other. But with an injured Baker Mayfield, they ultimately won the game. Another close game. Vikings could have won. They just didn't do anything offensively, really. Mayfield struggled. Obviously, they had drops in this game. They could have even blown the doors off the Vikings. Kirk Cousins threw his first pick of the year, which I think he threw like 6 or so, and most of it was at the very end of the year. And I know some were called back against Green Bay and other stuff like that, but didn't play great. Didn't play horrible, but only 7 points. Could not run the ball. They tried with all types of different runners, and Cook or Madison did not work. And they fall to 1-3. Play the Lions. Team they allowed to almost lose to. Again, later in the year, they do lose to this team. But the Lions didn't win a game at this point. Didn't win for another 2 months or so. And it took until the last second field goal to win. They didn't do much offensively. You look at the stat line, they had some rushing attempts and decent yardage on it, but the Vikings, decent rushing yards, decent yards per play was decent. There was an interception in there, but it was a fumble by Madison. Shouldn't have been this close, but it was. And it's kind of the Vikings season. They played a lot of close games, especially probably 3/4 of the season. Beginning of it was all close games. And they had the Carolina team was coming off 2 losses, and Vikings winning overtime, allowing the Panthers again come back down 10 points late in the game. Was it 10? Whatever, 11. 11 points, 2-point conversion, touchdown, and field goal. Kirk Cousins played really well. The rushing attack was great. It's one of the few games where the Panthers defense didn't play well. This could not stop the Cowboys or the Vikings in really any phase. And again, Vikings defense played well. I think it's more the Panthers offense. But again, the Vikings defense did not play well overall in the season. And that's disappointing because as a defensive head coach, defensive mind, and the last 2 years, they just did not play well. Got a bye week, played the Cowboys. And the Vikings lose to a backup quarterback in Cooper Rush. Again, close game, came down to the very end. And I actually thought, I don't know if it was a coaching thing, but they could have let the Cowboys score, or I just didn't like how they played it. They gave up a first down late in the game, if people remember. Might have been Elliott. Either way, they gave up a first down, and it was very third and long, second and long, and they just give up the touchdown. If they're going to give it up any yards, they're going to give up a touchdown. Don't give up a first down so they can waste more of the clock. And it just didn't give Cousins enough time to end to get anything, if they even had a shot. Again, they lose. Offensive just struggled that game. Can't really blame too much defense. They got a huge pass, I think, to Cedric Wilson or something in that game. Again, 3-4 Vikings. Again, they had chances in all these games. Another game, overtime. A lot of the Ravens to come back. Wasn't, complete comeback, but Ravens were down pretty much the whole game. And Adam Thielen touchdown with 1 minute. And even though the Vikings tied it up, the Ravens came in overtime and just won the game. And Kirk Cousins, not great, ran the ball really well. And Lamar Jackson did have 2 interceptions, but you could just see the Ravens had the ball a lot, controlled this game. And even though the Vikings had a good start, they just couldn't hold. And even the late comeback, tie it up, wasn't enough. Play the Chargers, team that had very big problems stopping the run. And they're going to improve next year, but this year they just didn't have the personnel to run what they wanted. And Vikings just controlled this game in every facet pretty much. Herbert was one of his worst games statistically. They couldn't stay on the field and couldn't run the ball. And the Vikings come out with a victory. So now they're 4-5. After they were 3-5, now 4-5. They play Green Bay. Upset win. They did win the year before in Lambeau. This time they're home and they win against Green Bay, splitting the series again. This was the first game of the year against them, against Green Bay, and back and forth. Really, who came down to have the ball at the very end, and the Vikings didn't give Packers or Aaron Rodgers a chance to do anything at the end of the game. Quick touchdown they had to Valdez-Scantling, 75 yards, 2 minutes in the game, and then they never touch it. I would say there was a few plays in this game. I'm not saying they're bad calls. There's just a lot of Green Bay mistake penalty-wise. Especially they had a slow start, Green Bay, but there was multiple picks in this game. I think mostly by Savage, even drop pick that just taken away because of penalty or just dropping interceptions. So Cousins could have had multiple interceptions in this game. He had none. Stat line looked really good. They couldn't stop Justin Jefferson. Eric Stokes was on him, and he had good coverage most of the time. He just the jump ball, the contested catch. Jefferson won that battle. So even though Rodgers had maybe his best game of the year regular season, wasn't ultimately enough. Especially that second half, Rodgers was 4 drives, 4 touchdowns, I believe. Couldn't really run the ball well. Didn't have Aaron Jones, and even with the injured toe Aaron Rodgers could not stop the Vikings, or could not do enough to win against the Vikings. Then they had the San Francisco. I know Kirk Cousins threw an interception in this game. Can't remember if it was a pick 6 or not, but either way, there was a kickoff return the Vikings did have, just like the Ravens game. That's why they didn't have the ball as much that game. Kind of like this game, couldn't really stay on the field. It wasn't too bad, but couldn't run the ball. And the 49ers could do whatever they wanted. They had over 200 rushing yards, I think. Yeah, over 200. And past game, Garoppolo threw a dumb interception, but other than that, played fairly well, the 49ers, and they, no scoring in the fourth quarter. Ultimately, the 49ers were the better team overall. Play the Lions. This is where basically the season was over. You had a great win against the Packers. You beat the Chargers before that. And then you play San Francisco, you lose. Okay, and then you go to Detroit and you lose in the last second. They played 2 very, very close games to Detroit, and they split it. They're a better team than the Detroit Lions, and on those days, they allowed the Detroit Lions to play good enough to ultimately split the series and could have lost both games. Obviously, they could have won them both, but there was really no excuse. Ultimately, Pittsburgh, they almost blew up one of the largest leads in NFL history. Don't know how much I put on the offense. There was interceptions. I know Cousins threw this game. Threw 2. Did not have a great game offensively. They did run the ball really well, especially the first half. Could have probably relied on it more. But, Steelers looked decently well against the Vikings defense. And ultimately, without that drop touchdown at the very end by Freiermuth, this could have been an overtime game and another close loss. But ultimately, they won the game. Close game. Wasn't a close game for the most part, but at the very end, it was close. And they do pull it off. Play the Bears in a game they gave every chance for the Bears to win. They ultimately the Bears was pathetic on this day, and I don't know, it was the coaches, the game plan. It was just horrible for the Bears. I know they're not a great team, but what? Kirk threw a pick. They gave just the penalties in this game. Bears could have won this game, and they just did not come up to play play a decent game. If they played decent, played good, they probably win. The Vikings keep on their season alive, 7-7, but then they lose 2 games at the end. One to the Rams. This is pretty much the game they had to win, and they didn't. I know Stafford threw dumb interceptions, but they ran the ball with Sony Michel pretty well. Kirk Cousins threw another pick, even though he didn't throw a lot this year and had a good season for the most part. Threw for a lot of yards, didn't have a lot of help running in the running game, but giving up 30 points, even though they had the 3 picks. And then they played Green Bay. This was basically where it was over. Kirk Cousins did not play. I think it was COVID reasons. Sean Mannion played. Statline's even think that it was not as good as it really was. I mean, really how bad it was. Cold game, could not do anything. Rodgers, played good. There was chance the Vikings early on could have, they were wasn't a great showing for the Packers, but then they got it together and they dominated the game in the second and third quarter. That allowed Green Bay to already won the division, but put the Vikings out of the playoffs and left Green Bay the only one in the NFC North to make the playoffs. Put a meaningless game against the Bears. Ultimately, they won. Both teams would fire the head coach and general manager after the season. There was mostly a lot of touchdowns. They were down in the game, and pass offense from Kirk Cousins played really well. And there was a pick six at the end by Patrick Peterson, his only pick of the year, in his first year in Minnesota. Who knows if he comes back, but obviously his prime was long gone by now. Andy Dalton threw a lot in this game. Wasn't great. Okay rushing performance, but Minnesota was the better team overall in the year and the better team this day in this game. So let's go over the stats really quick. Dalvin Cook did have 1,000 yards. He didn't play a lot of games. I mean, he missed some games, 4 games in fact, and was injured in a few of them. Madison, almost 500 yards. Not a lot of rushing touchdowns if you look at it. Just 10 on the year. And they give a 15 defensively, which isn't that bad. Passing wise, Kirk Cousins 33 touchdowns, 7 picks. Man, he did that 1 touchdown. Kellen Mond barely played. The quarterback they drafted in the 3rd round, I believe. I was going to also look at if we can find the opponent receiving touch. So you think about they scored as much as the opponents. Their touchdowns came in bunches usually, and that's why they were an A9 team. And that they're if you want to say rebuilding, definitely rebuilding the defense. Offensively, it might be a lot of similar things. Let's go on the draft though. Obviously, this mock draft has them getting Derek Stingley. They need corner. Probably need linebackers. Might even need some pass rushers. They did restructured to Neil Hunter today. They need tight end presence. They did have, I don't know that that's a big need. I should just say, do with Irv Smith, who I don't know if he showed he should be a starter, but give him another year. I don't think it's a must. Maybe this is a team that ran a lot of zones, so 2 tight ends is in their offense. Jefferson is definitely one of the number ones, and then Adam Thielen getting older, but took a pay cut, probably at least restructured to stay in Minnesota. And who knows if Osborne's a 3rd next year. I think the offense is fine for the most part. I've been trying to build offensive line. It's better than years past. But again, not a lot of holes on the offense, but could they get a lineman? Sure. Maybe a tight end, but these more midday picks. Maybe offensive line could be early, but it's probably a lot of defense. I know they got a Kevin O'Connell as their head coach. So offensive guy. Uh, he's more of that Rams West Coast background with it's kind of, I don't want to say like North Turner-ish, but it's more Rams than it would be like the Washington Commanders kind of scheme. But again, that's similar to what they run already, so not big changes there. And 3-4 Mike Pettin. They got Zadarius Smith, so they got an outside linebacker for this scheme. It's what the Packers ran 2 years ago, and we've seen it with the Jets. We've seen it with the Bills in the last decade or so. A little more than a decade, honestly. Mike Pettin's been around the league for a while, and get another crack at it as a defensive coordinator. And I think he'll have success. I was thinking, is Daniel Hunter a linebacker now? I'm guessing he is. They got Zadarius Smith, so they have the pass rushers. Now it's the secondary. You have Harrison Smith, who's getting up there in age, and even if you think you can believe on him and count on him, who else is on this team? Eric Kendricks, he's getting older too. I don't know what's going to happen with Anthony Barr, but a lot of questions on the defense. So I wouldn't be surprised with corner. I guess you can't even be surprised if it's quarterback. I don't think it's going to happen. They really seem like they're committed for Kirk Cousins for another year at least. And so I would be surprised after drafting a quarterback in the third round that they would draft a quarterback higher than that or even at all. So maybe that's next year or down the road. But again, this is the team that has a chance to compete. Maybe not for the division, but a playoff spot. The NFC's not that strong. And I wouldn't count them out. They're not a great team, but there's a lot of pieces there. And they can be something. I think I'm going to end it here. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate you listening. And, we've got a few more teams coming up. You got the Browns, which we'll talk about. Obviously, a big trade in recent days. And then we got Ravens and then Miami Dolphins. Again, thanks for watching. Hopefully you subscribe. And hopefully you watch my upcoming content and videos. Have a great day.